Imagine the limestone under your boots still holds last night's cool, but the air already tastes of salt and sun. You see Grand Harbour spread like a mouth that can swallow fleets. You feel a new year sitting on your shoulders like a promise, fresh vows, clean pages, until the horizon bruises. You hear it before you see it, oars catching water in one shared breath, a giant animal inhaling. The sound grows, therefore your throat tightens. You see masts multiply out of the haze, banners hanging like fresh wounds against the bright sky. The sea does not glitter now, it hardens. Malta stops being an island and becomes a room with the door bolted from the outside. Imagine your hands smell of lamp oil and iron. You rub thumb and forefinger and feel the grit that never leaves, powder dust, limestone dust, dried sweat. You taste old bread in your mouth, but it tastes more like fear than flour. Men on the walls argue numbers below their breath. Someone insists the enemy is merely a hard raid. Someone else swears the sea carries a nation. You don't get to measure the fleet like a scholar. You get to decide where to put bodies, powder, and the last clean water. You see the Grand Master, Valette, move along the stone like a man carved from it. His face does not ask if the island can win. His face asks how long the island can endure. That changes everything, because a battle ends when one side breaks. But a test of time ends when time runs out. The first shots do not feel heroic. They feel practical. A cannon coughs across the water, and you hear the ball arrive a heartbeat later, stone cracking, dust blooming, range finding, measuring. The enemy does not simply fire at walls, the enemy counts. Each impact feels like a hand pressing on your spine, checking for weakness. Imagine the Ottoman ship's anchor and the water fills with smaller shapes, boats like beetles, gliding toward land. You see the harbor narrowing in your mind. If Fort St. Elmo falls, the throat of Grand Harbour opens. Therefore, every fort behind it, Burgu, Singlia, becomes reachable, killable, burnable. The island suddenly has a single fuse, and you stand beside it. You feel heat rise as the day climbs. The helmet, if you wear one, turns into a pot on your skull. Sweat crawls down your ribs and soaks into cloth until cloth becomes a second skin. You lick your lips and taste salt, but it is not sea salt, it is your own. Water is not a comfort now. Water is a ration that decides who stands on the wall tomorrow. Imagine the first week of siege work pressing into your bones. You see men carry baskets of earth and stones, and each basket looks light until you lift one and feel the truth in your shoulders. The wall shudders through your boots as the Ottoman guns find their rhythm. The sound is not one explosion, it is a repeated beating, like an enormous fist knocking on a door that must not open. Fort St. Elmo sits forward like a tooth. You look at it and feel pity and envy at once. Pity, because it takes the first full blow. Envy, because it is so clearly important that every action has meaning. But here meaning feels like weight. The air around St. Elmo smells of smoke and pulverized limestone, a chalky bitterness that coats the tongue. You breathe and feel grit scrape the throat. The night does not bring peace. It brings work. You see lanterns bob along parapets like fireflies trapped in a jar. You hear shovels, baskets, low curses, prayers muttered through clenched teeth. A breach opens by day, therefore it must be stuffed by night, earth packed into gabions, beams wedged, broken stone piled until hands bleed. You feel splinters bite into your palms. Blood makes the limestone darker, then the dust makes it pale again. Nothing stays clean. Fog of war wraps itself around every decision. You hear that Sicily promises help, but you also hear that Sicily hesitates. You hear that the enemy will offer mercy, but you also hear what mercy means when it comes from a conquering fleet. There is no clear truth, only competing whispers. Therefore, the only reliable thing is the next cannonball. Imagine standing near the waterline, smelling tar and pitch from ships and defenses. The scent is sharp and sticky, clinging to the nostrils. You see barrels, coils of rope, piles of stones meant to be thrown like insults. You feel the weight of your weapon, sword, pike, arquebus, dragging on tired arms. It is not romantic weight, it is the weight of repetition. Lift, aim, strike, reload, pray the powder stays dry. The Ottomans do not only attack with iron, they attack with sound. You hear drums across the water, steady and confident. The rhythm tries to climb into your heartbeat and take control. You hear shouted offers, words carried by wind, words that promise life if you yield. But the tone feels like a bargain offered by a shark, smooth, certain, hungry. Therefore, the wall becomes not only stone, but stubbornness. You see severed heads displayed where the eye cannot avoid them. The message is simple: time is not your ally. But the message collides with another truth: surrender ends uncertainty, but it also ends you as you are. Therefore, you remain in the fog, because at least the fog allows choices. Fort St. Elmo becomes a furnace. Imagine the sun sitting directly on the fort like a hot hand. The air shimmers. You taste salt, smoke, and stone dust. Sleep comes in stolen minutes, leaning against rock, eyes closing, a body falling into darkness, like dropping a coin into a well. Then a blast yanks you back, and your mouth wakes full of grit and panic. You see the defenders there grow hollow. Their cheeks sink. Their eyes become too bright. Every day the walls become smaller, not because the fort shrinks on a map, but because the fort turns into gravel around living men. The guns do not stop. They learn. They adjust. The angle changes, therefore a place that felt safe yesterday becomes a death trap today. You hear a name carried in anxious voices: Dragit, Turgot Reese, like a storm moving closer. Whether the name is spoken as curse or as respect, the effect is the same. The tempo changes. You feel it before anyone proves it. Shots land truer. The enemy seems to read the walls, therefore every movement on your side feels exposed. You crouch lower, not out of cowardice, but because the air itself feels hunted. Imagine a moment when a rumor sparks like a match in dry grass. A blast, a shout, bodies pointing. Word spreads that Dragit is hit. You don't know if it is true. You don't see his blood. You only know the Ottoman guns do not stop. Therefore hope becomes dangerous, sweet, but distracting. The days grind down into a single long day. Heat, smoke, shouting, dust. Then a strange sweetness enters the air near the wounded. You smell it and recoil, because it is wrong sweet. Rot, infection, the body's defeat. Flies learn the shape of open wounds and do not forget. You wave them away, but they return with calm persistence. Latrines overflow. You smell human waste, baked by sun. You gag, but there is no place to gag privately. Dignity becomes a luxury. Therefore, the mind learns to ignore what once would break it. Hunger becomes a constant ache behind the ribs. You chew hard bread that scratches the gums. You imagine meat and taste only dust. Conflicting orders cut deeper than shrapnel. Hold St. Elmo to the last, because it pins the enemy outside the harbor's throat. But pull back, because every man lost there is a man not standing on Burgu's wall later. You see faces tighten when the debate reaches you. No one says the truth out loud. Every choice is a sacrifice. Only the timing changes. Imagine the moment the fort's shape changes from defense to ruin. A section collapses, and the sound is not a crack but a groan, like the stone is tired. You see smoke roll through the gap and feel your stomach drop, because a breach is not a hole. A breach is an invitation. Therefore the air fills with the scrape of ladders and the thud of boots. You fight in a place that no longer looks like a fort. It looks like a quarry filled with men. The limestone dust turns sweat into paste on your face. Your eyes sting. You blink and smear it, therefore vision becomes partial, unreliable. The fog of war becomes literal: smoke, dust, heat haze. You swing at shapes. You fire toward movement. You listen for the sound of your own side calling, because the wrong step brings a blade from someone who also sees only shapes. You feel the weight of your sword or pike not as metal but as fatigue. Every strike is slower. Every breath feels shorter. But the enemy keeps coming. That is the terror of numbers. Even when the enemy dies, the enemy does not end. Therefore, courage becomes less like a flame and more like a stubborn muscle that refuses to relax. Fort St. Elmo finally breaks. You hear a roar that feels like a door being forced. The defenders are swallowed by noise and smoke. You see flags rise over shattered stone. You feel a hollow in your chest where certainty used to be, but you're still alive. Therefore, the mind scrambles for the next line, the next wall, the next breath. You retreat, and the retreat tastes like ashes. Not because running is shameful, but because the harbor mouth is now guarded by enemy cannon. You feel the island's clock ticking louder, not in sound but in pressure. The throat is open. The enemy can bring guns into positions that stare straight into Burgu and Singlia. Therefore, every street behind you becomes a possible kill zone. Imagine Burgu now, crowded and tense. You see stone houses pressed together, narrow lanes that trap heat and smell. You smell sweat, animals, smoke, and brine. You hear prayers spoken too quickly. You see faces turned toward the sea, searching for sails that might mean help. But the water shows only the enemy's confidence. Therefore, hope becomes something you ration like water. The guns begin to speak to Burgu and Singlia. The walls shake. Dust falls from ceilings. A child, if there is a child near you, does not understand strategy, but understands fear, therefore crying becomes part of the siege's music. You feel the concussion in your teeth. You taste powder when the wind carries it. Night labor returns, heavier than before. You haul earth to patch fresh holes. You stack fascines. You wedge beams into gaps. Your hands cramp, and still you keep working, because a breach at dawn becomes death by noon. Therefore, dawn feels like a deadline rather than a beginning. Imagine standing watch in darkness. You see little beyond a strip of moonlit water and the faint shape of enemy works. You hear the scrape of tools from the other side, digging, building, preparing. The enemy also labors at night. Therefore, the darkness feels crowded with intentions. You don't know where the next assault hits. You only know it comes. Food shrinks. Water shrinks. You count sips like prayer beads. A cup of water becomes a decision. Drink now and think later, or save and suffer now to think later. You see men try to hide thirst behind jokes, but the jokes come thin. Lips split. Tongues swell. Therefore tempers snap at small things, an insult, a spilled drop, a cue cut short. The siege is not only steel, it is logistics with teeth. The enemy also bleeds time. You hear that their camp stinks in its own way. You imagine disease moving through tents like a silent thief. But you cannot rely on enemy misery. Therefore, the focus returns to your own wall, your own hands, your own next hour. Then the day arrives that does not feel like a day. It feels like a verdict approaching. The great assault comes with sun already burning. Imagine standing on the wall and feeling the stone radiate heat up through your boots. Your forearms shake from lifting rocks and weapons. Your ears ring so hard the world feels underwater, as if the harbor pours into your skull. You look across the ditch and see the Ottoman mass gather. It does not look like an army in neat lines. It looks like a living tide, shields up, helmets dull with dust, faces slick with sweat. Ladders rise like a forest of thin trunks. You smell bodies packed together, the sourness of men who have marched, fought, and waited. Therefore, the air itself feels crowded, heavy with breath. The first rush hits like a storm front. Arrows and shot hiss. You duck, but the wall offers only partial safety. Stone chips explode into your face. You spit and taste grit. You hear a ladder hook bite the parapet, metal on stone, a sound that makes the spine tighten. A hand appears over the lip. You bring your blade down and the hand vanishes. But another appears. Therefore, you learn the enemy's patience. The wall is a machine, and the enemy tries to jam it with bodies until it breaks. Imagine your arms going numb from repetition. Strike. Push. Kick a ladder. Stab downward. The body moves while the mind lags behind. Therefore, everything becomes simple. Keep the edge between the enemy and your throat. You hear men shout for more stones, more pikes, more powder. But powder runs low. The smell of black powder is sharp, bitter, and familiar, but the pouch feels too light. Therefore, every shot becomes a choice, not a habit. On the water, another danger grows. You see boats pushing towards Singlia, oars biting the sea like teeth. The boats carry soldiers low to the water, packed tight. You smell pitch and tar from defensive works, and the scent mixes with panic until it becomes its own perfume, hot, sticky fear. The sea itself seems to carry enemies, therefore the mind refuses to treat water as safety. Fog of war thickens. You don't know if Sicily sends help. You don't know if the next hour is the last hour. You only know the breach is real and it is hungry. Someone shouts that a section gives way. Someone else screams that the boats slip through. You cannot verify any of it, therefore rumor becomes as dangerous as steel. Imagine looking down and seeing ladders multiplied. 1, 2, 10, each one a thin promise of invasion. The enemy finds a rhythm. Hook, climb, spill. Hook, climb, spill. Therefore your defense must break rhythm, not merely resist it. You grab a heavy stone. Your fingers slip on sweat and dust. You heave it over. It drops into a crowd below with a dull crunch you feel more than hear. The sound is not triumphant. It is simply necessary. A fire pot arcs through the air. You see it spin, trailing smoke like a comet. It shatters and fire blooms, orange, hungry, alive. You smell burning pitch, a thick smoke that grabs the lungs. Men scream in a way that does not sound human. But the screams do not stop the rush. Therefore, the mind understands a brutal truth. Pain does not always slow an assault. You feel the wall begin to slip in a way that has nothing to do with stone. You feel it in the faces around you, eyes too wide, breaths too fast, hands trembling as they fumble reloads. For one terrifying minute, it feels like the island tips. You smell defeat before you see it, a cold metallic taste in the mouth, as if the tongue touches a coin. A ladder stays in place. Another stays. A third. The parapet's edge becomes crowded with helmets and hands. You strike one, but another replaces it. Therefore, the wall becomes a cliff edge crumbling under your boots. Your heel skids on dust. Your heart hammers. You don't know if you stand at the last line of Malta or merely the next to last. Then, behind you, a different sound cuts through the chaos. Not fear, signal. A shout carries purpose. You see men forming, not scattering. A counterattack gathers like a fist closing. Therefore, the air changes. Not safer, never safe, but sharper, directed. You feel bodies press past, shouldering into the breach. You hear orders barked short, words chosen for speed. Pikes lower. Blades come up. Someone throws more fire pots. Smoke thickens. Your eyes water. Tears cut lines through the dust on your cheeks. But the line holds for another heartbeat. Therefore, another heartbeat becomes possible. Imagine the fight narrowing to a single ladder, a single gap, a single man trying to crest the wall. You see his fingers white on stone. You see his eyes for a fraction of a second, human, determined, afraid. You bring your weapon down. He falls back, but another replaces him. Therefore, mercy becomes something you postpone to a world that allows it. The boats at Singlia meet their own answer. You hear the crash of defenses and the boom of cannon at close range. You see water churn red near the hulls. Some boats drift, oars broken, men slumped. But others keep coming. Therefore, the sea becomes a battlefield that refuses to choose a side. Time stretches. You cannot tell if minutes pass or hours. The sun remains overhead like an unblinking eye. Your mouth dries until the tongue sticks. You swallow and feel nothing. You want water, but you want the wall more. Therefore, thirst becomes a tool the siege uses to carve you down. Gradually, the rush falters. Not because the enemy suddenly doubts, but because bodies pile, because smoke blinds, because defenders keep stuffing the breach with resistance. You see Ottoman soldiers pull back a few steps, reform, surge again. But the surge loses some edge. Therefore, the counterattack does not win, yet it prevents losing. When the assault finally eases, you do not feel victory. You feel the strange exhaustion that follows surviving. Your arms shake even when you stop. Your ears continue ringing, therefore silence does not arrive, it is only quieter noise. You look down at the stones and realize they are not stones anymore. They are names. Every repaired breach is a grave you stand on. The siege continues, but something changes. You sense it like a shift in wind. The Ottoman camp begins to fray. Weather turns less obedient. Wounds fester there too. Food lines shorten. The men across the ditch still look dangerous, but they also look tired. Therefore, the siege reveals its true shape, two starving machines grinding against each other, each hoping the other runs out first. Imagine days where the air smells of smoke and sickness, and each morning begins with counting. Who stands, who lies still, who speaks, who stares. You see bandages dark with old blood. You smell that wrong sweet rot again. You watch flies land and land again. Therefore, the mind learns to live alongside decay without collapsing. Rumors about relief return like ghosts. Sicily comes. Sicily delays. Sicily cannot risk it. Sicily must send something. You don't know which version kills faster, the false hope or the true despair. Therefore, you treat every horizon like a liar. Then one morning, a new sound rides the air, thin at first, easy to dismiss. Distant shouting. Unfamiliar signals. You see movement on a far shore that does not match the enemy's rhythm. You blink hard because dust and fatigue make visions unreliable. But the movement persists. Therefore, the chest tightens with something close to disbelief. The Grand Soccorso lands from Sicily in September AD 1565, but it does not look like a shining crusade. You see tired men stumbling onto shore, armor dulled, faces drawn. They look like survivors, not saviors. But the effect is electric. Therefore, the island's posture changes. Defenders straighten, not because strength magically returns, but because the mind finally sees proof that the world outside Malta still exists. Across the water, the Ottoman camp stirs like an animal sensing winter. The enemy has spent months paying in bodies for a rock that refuses to break. Now the enemy must decide if more payment buys anything at all. Therefore, hesitation, small but real, appears in the enemy's movements. You see fewer confident rushes. You hear fewer drums, or perhaps the drums sound different to ears that now believe in tomorrow. The Ottoman guns still fire, but the pattern feels less hungry, more weary. Therefore, the siege becomes a question asked again and again: how much time remains, and for whom? The fleet finally withdraws. The sea that once looked like a wall of masts begins to open. Ships turn their prows away. Sails catch wind. You watch them go and feel no clean triumph. The body is too tired for celebration. Therefore, the first response is not cheering. The first response is breathing, deep, shaking breaths, as if lungs learn a new job. Imagine stepping down from the wall after it ends. Your legs feel wrong, as if the ground tilts. Your hands still curl as if gripping a weapon. The smell of smoke clings to hair and cloth. You look at the repaired breaches and understand the arithmetic. Each patch costs a life, sometimes several. Therefore, survival is not free. It is purchased in flesh. The verdict settles in the dust. Malta holds, but it holds like a bruised ribcage, intact, painful, alive. You see faces missing from familiar corners. You hear the absence in the way a street sounds when fewer footsteps walk it. You feel the weight of names that no longer answer. The siege ends, but the body keeps the memory and scars, in ringing ears, in the way sudden noises still make shoulders jump. Therefore, the cost continues after the cannons stop. The mirror rises without asking permission. Do you see the pattern today? Choke points decide empires, harbors, straits, data cables, supply chains. Power does not always need to conquer everything. Power often needs only to control the narrow places where everything must pass. Therefore, a small rock in the sea becomes a lever against a giant. Another rule stands exposed. The true number of the enemy matters less than what happens while the number stays uncertain. You never receive perfect information on a wall under fire. You receive rumors, glimpses, noise. Therefore, the fog is not a footnote, it is the battlefield. Choices made in uncertainty become history's spine. And Malta offers the darkest comfort. Small places can force big powers to spend time they don't have. The island does not outnumber the fleet. The island outlasts the fleet. Therefore, survival becomes a kind of mathematics, minutes turned into months, months turned into failure for someone who cannot afford delay. The legacy question waits like a silent sentry. Imagine standing again on that wall, hearing oars breathe in unison beyond the haze. You see the enemy's banners like wounds in the sky. You feel thirst cracking your lips as rumors collide in your ears. When certainty disappears and time becomes the only currency, what do you spend first? Mercy, truth, or people?